That mailer that you guys did is wild. Right. I'm definitely like, you guys had to go back to 2022 to find video you're talking about. Kind of started.
I was going off Casby's.
I wasn't even this bored, guys, don't hustle us.
Okay, Melissa, are we ready to go? Okay, let's get started. Thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. The time is a little past 4 p.m. It's October 15th, 2025. In attendance, Director Jurgensen, Director Curie, Director Hafley, Director Packham, Director Art, and I saw Director Huber and Director Bankus here, so they should be joining us. All 7 board members in attendance in person, and Superintendent Gall and his team are present here as well. So the work session agenda topics today, it's going to start with the Unified School Improvement Plan, and the school that is in front of the board is Rogers Elementary School. We are going to look at that Unified School Improvement Plan. It is, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Gall in a minute. It's my understanding that the initial plan was to appeal the designation of the school in the school performance framework, but after further analyzing the data, it was decided that not to pursue that option. Superintendent Gall, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I think Rogers administration staff are
They
here.
are. Jennifer's here and Sarah's here as well. And I have David here to explain a little bit why we're late, because we had put in a request for review. I'll let David cover the technicalities behind that. I just want to give my strongest vote of confidence for Jennifer and what's happening at Rogers. We went earlier this year, and I actually left with this incredibly powerful moment of seeing CKLA be briefed with consistency, not just, I shouldn't say brief, taught, not just within Rogers, but across the district. And I remember leaving, I think I was either with Nicole or Carol that day, and I was like, it is the first time I saw us bring a curriculum to bear. And I believe that was your third grade team, and it was great. And it was my introduction that Frog and Toad is still in sets of curriculum, as I remember reading Frog and Toad to my kids. And so with that, I'm going to ask David to start us off on why we're here late for this.
Yeah, so thank you. So you can see on the screen, just a really quick overview of the request to reconsider process. We utilize DIBELS K2 data, the idea behind that being like taking into account the foundational aspects of students coming into the tested grades of grade 3. So utilizing K2 DIBELS, it requires a 95% participation minimum in each grade level and for achievement and growth. So it's kind of laid out in a similar way that the SPF is, breaking out achievement and growth individually. The growth adds the extra caveat of requiring a beginning of year assessment and end of year assessment for the student to be counted into the 95%. And so what happened was after go through the worksheets that CDE gives us to do the initial threshold of participation, Rogers did not meet that. I want to emphasize that it really becomes a function, an indirect function of small school and high mobility as well, because they didn't meet that 95% participation rate in growth, meaning simply there wasn't necessarily the two assessments per kid. On the back end, it was like about a division of about 4 to 5 students. So at a small school, 4 to 5 students really, well, 4 to 5 schools matter in any school, but in this case, it really affects it. To to get both of those growth scores. So the real takeaway here, they did not meet the threshold, not out of lack of effort and lack of giving DIBELS or utilizing DIBELS to its full potential. It was simply, was really a function of not having 2 scores to measure growth on and not meeting the 95% participation. So any questions on that? Happy to follow up with anybody offline, but I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks,
So
David.
what you're talking about is basically the DIBEL score we didn't have.
Yes, so
And
you're
that
allowed
is-
to use DIBELS as another point of measure, but due to the small size of the school and the mobility within that grade, the DIBELS didn't qualify for that number. The number that we saw for DIBELS said, oh, totally, it validates our ability to get the extra couple of points. But when then digging into those numbers of the kids that actually took it in the fall and in the spring, that became a non-entry to the request to review.
All right. Well, hello, good afternoon. I've got some teachers over here that were able to step out, but most of my teachers are doing parent-teacher conferences right now, so they couldn't be here. But I do want to give them all a huge shout out because they are working really hard and doing a really great job. So thank you. I'm Jennifer Morrell. I'm the principal at Rogers. I'm going into my 3rd year there. And I snapped this picture early in September and was walking up to school in the morning, and I had actually been kind of following that hot air balloon for a while. And as I was walking up, it was like the perfect shot right there because not only does it look like our school and our emblem there, but it really, as you walk in our doors, you'll see hot air balloons painted on the walls and a sign that says, Todo es posible, which means anything is possible. And I really feel like we are set up this year to meet that goal of what we want to meet and that everything is possible for our students. And so I wanted to share that. Just a picture of our kiddos in action here. Last year we were very fortunate to really get our curriculum unified. Meaning that for the first time since I've been there, we had curriculum in both English and Spanish. We are in our 3rd year pathway program at our school, and having our curriculum really just aligned has been really a big thing for us this year. All right, so 24-25 data, where are we now? You can go ahead and go to the next one. Came into this year feeling pretty devastated by looking at this data. Typically, over the past years that I've watched before I got there, we've been red in the top, but where we shine is in our growth, and it's been green all in every subcategory. Unfortunately, this year we did not make the growth, and we are just far away from where we need to be for both ELA and math. And we own that data, and it's unacceptable, and it's definitely something that's right in our forefront as we're moving forward of how are we gonna make that different for next year, this year. All right, on this slide, as you can see in 2023, green is where we wanna be, performance school. We went up slightly in 2024, and then we took a pretty big dip last year. And once again, that dip is because we didn't make the growth needed to get the points to be a performance school again. 50 is that magic number we want to be at and to make a year's growth, but really as a school we want up in the 60s if possible, because we know the skills gaps that many of our students have are very large. And to close those gaps, we really want it way above 50. So in reading, we were at 46, so four points below that 50. And in math, we were 3 points below that 50. And if you look to the side, we have a teacher 1, 2, and 3. And this is highlighting our fourth grade teachers. And the reason that was brought up as such an interesting point is with growth, it is really about our 4th and 5th grade teachers and those students and their data. And if you look at teacher 3 in particular, you see an 11 there, and that really brought everything down. And to be honest with you, we were tracking data heading in that direction, but not nearly where we see that. And so we would have made changes a lot sooner had we been tracking data to show that we would have those kinds of results. And so we have put things into place. In fact, we are doing STAR monthly rather than 3 times a year as a progress monitor, and then other progress monitor pieces as well, so that we come May and we're surprised that we got those kind of results will not happen again. And so once again, we really want our medium growth percentiles to be up in the 60s, and that's what we're gonna push for this upcoming year.
You want to talk a little bit about coaching of your new teachers? We can say that teacher 3 is no longer with us,
Yes, that is true.
but yeah, talk about
Yeah.
coaching and the new teachers to make sure we don't have that.
Absolutely, and my partner might be coming in here with my notes that I left on my desk, so, you know, so far so good, but we'll try to make sure, I'm trying to remember every piece that I wanted to hit, so thank you, Sarah. Yes, the teacher 3 is no longer with us, and you know, I think we've really had to think about how do we make sure that we don't end up with this again. Already this year, we've got some really amazing new teachers. One is a Teach for America teacher that we have in, brand new, really young, so energetic, who ended up with a really tough group. And almost immediately, we started reaching out to our school embedded coach for support. Oh, good. Maybe I won't miss as much. Thank you, Mr. Green. That's our assistant principal. We reached out to and got coaching started almost immediately, just knowing that we have to get procedures in place. And in fact, our coach is with us. Jen, can you wave? Yeah, she's amazing. But we also realized, you know, that was kind of like a tier 2, but we wanted to also add a tier 3 because her learning curve was so deep, coming from Washington into Colorado and all of it. And so very quickly, I have to say, reached out to my group, and within the next couple days, we had a district embedded coach in there as well. And so she had tons of support wrapped around her, and along with another one of our newer teachers. And I feel like that shift of being able to do that as a principal this year is in doing it early, not waiting until, you know, it's March and we're worried. I think it's gonna change the trajectory of that classroom. And so I am very thankful for that. In this area, you know, we always want to grow the green and shrink the red. I was very happy that we grew the green a little bit, but we also grew the red. And so that's unacceptable, and we need to look into our subgroups a little bit deeper and make sure that what they are getting for not only core instruction, but our tier 2 and our tier 3s are serving them better. Because, and I'm not just saying our subgroups are down there, but we've really got to ensure that that doesn't happen again. All right, this is our STAR and ELA, and it is making an upward slope over time, but we'd like it to be more like this to meet the achievement and where we want to get to. One of the things that we're doing, we've already kind of seen that group that we saw earlier that had an 11 median growth percentile. We're seeing them struggle in math in 5th grade. And so starting last Monday, this first semester, we decided to use the strengths of our teachers. We have a new 5th grade teacher in from Texas who was a math interventionist, and he knows math back and forward. And so we made the move to departmentalize right now, starting Monday, so that that teacher can just focus on math with all of our 5th graders. And then our other teacher is focusing on reading. And we're already seeing some good results of that. Even in 4 days, we're thinking that was really a good thing. And so making moves like that right now as we see things come up are essential in making sure that that line goes up faster in the future. Right. So this is our 5E climate and culture. And you'll see in 2023, there's a lot of gray. And it's gray when there's not enough data. So the yellow part on 2023 is what the students thought. And then in 2024, you see again, our students were pretty happy and we were all green in ambitious instruction and supportive environment, which I'm extremely proud of. But once again, we were in gray. And then in 2025, we are colorful, which is wonderful because that means that the teachers gave us feedback. And one of the things going in as their principal I really wanted to build was trust. And a lot of the feedback I had is that teachers don't do surveys here because we don't trust what will happen with that data or that something might happen by being honest. And so, you know, we are just thrilled to have data because we can do something when we know how teachers feel about their environment. It's hard to read their minds and change things without that. And so we once again, we're really happy to have that data, and we're looking forward to doing it again this year so that we can see how we're improving. All right, I talked a little bit how important coaching has been. I think, you know, at the beginning of the year, it wasn't quite ingrained in our school as much as it needed to be, for sure. In fact, we really relied on our embedded coach to do the coaching. This year, both Jeff and I are coaches as well. We have Claudette coming in to coach and help with DLI. And so instead of, you know, all of our teachers getting one coaching cycle, we've already done. We're getting ready to go into cycle 3, where all of our teachers are getting at least one kind of touch point or some kind of coaching. And it's made our culture much more collaborative, and it's made it so that it's safe to have everyone in your classroom. What I really love is somehow magically our preschool teacher is now going into kindergarten, and they're giving each other peer observations and some coaching feedback. And so it's growing in a really positive way, which is also going to really support our student achievement. All right, this is our actions and response. Our MIS1 is all about high quality instruction and really elevating that rigor. I think it's incredibly important. As a teacher, I like to see it in action. I like to go into other people's classrooms and see, what does it look like? What is best practice? And oftentimes when we get, you know, new resources, it's just a piece of paper, right? And so to go and see it modeled is huge especially for our newer teachers. We are really lucky to have a model teacher in our building. Her data back there, when you saw 63 on the median growth percentile, that was her data. We know, and we picked her brain. What did you do? Why did you get that? She's here right now, by the way. And so, and what she said, it was absolutely true, is that she does all the components. She doesn't skip things. She keeps her pacing right where it needs to be. She has a timer. And so she has become a model teacher for not just our teachers to go watch her, but a lot of external teachers are coming in and watching her. And it's making our environment even better. And she's not only math, but she's really strong in CKLA too. So we're doubling down on also with our primary students. We're a school that had, when I first came, I think we had the highest number of read plans in the district. And a read plan means you're 2 years behind. And a lot of those were in our upper grades. And to me, when kids are at the point where they're 2 years behind, it's like, whoa, what are we doing? Unfortunately, we're spending all our time intervening. And so what we're really trying to double down on is making sure our kindergarten, our first and our second grade students, before they get to third grade, are at grade level, so that we're not playing this catch-up game and they're not in a hole. And I will tell you, one of our kindergarten teachers, who's been a kindergarten teacher for a long time at Rogers, we were a pilot for CKLA last year. And at the end of the year, she made this remark of, wow, this is the first time I have kids coming out of kindergarten that are reading this high. And so once again, that says to me that instead of going into first grade with putting kids on read plans, we are going to put less kids on read plans, and the ones we are on we can focus on. And then for our third, fourth, and fifth graders who currently have that gap, you know, we're gonna continue to try to shrink that gap. But in the years to come, we're not going to have all that. And I think the curriculum as well, as because it is CKLA comes in English and in Spanish. We call that Caminos. And once again, it's unified in that we have it in both languages for the subject, and everybody's doing it. So it's going to pay off. Oh, you did? Okay. Student agency is growing quickly at our school. Student council. I had the teachers ask for 2 student council members, and we met with them, and we asked them to go back to their classes and talk about what's going really well at Rogers that you always want to have happen, and then what's not going very well. And then they brought back their top 2 things, and we brainstormed on what they would be. A lot of suggestions about school lunch that we have control over and don't have control over, but it was really, really fun. They love GT. They love our teachers. That came through very clear. They focused on bullying and people messing up the bathrooms. So our next step on that is I'm gonna put that into their hands and ask them how are we gonna solve it and make it a problem that they're solving and taking back to their class. And so putting kids in the driver's seat of their education is incredibly important. We're having all students track their own data, making goals. We're doing student-led conferences tonight, which is new to Rogers. And so when kids own their learning and are doing the cognitive load of their learning, that's going to result in higher achievement as well. All right, and this, once again, we're gonna use those model teachers and be in each other's classrooms. I think for Jeff and I, this year, we're laser-like focused being in classrooms. We're doing admin walks every Monday with different points of view. We've built capacity to be able to deal with some of our attendance and our behavior issues so that we can be in classrooms more and focused on what's happening every day. And so with all that, I really think the sky's the limit for our students. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Okay, hang on.
Okay.
You have anything to add? We good? Okay.
Did I hit everything?
Great.
Didn't even need it.
Back to Hafley.
So the student-led conferences that you just talked about, what does that look like, and are your conferences at 100%?
Well, we're gonna call and call and call and call. We did offer them as a WebEx in person or a phone call. And so our goal is 100%. So it differs, and I gave teachers the autonomy to decide what that looks like. They also spoke to each other a lot about what is that gonna look like here and there. And what we're doing is having the students show their parents their data and how much they've grown already and what their next goal is going to be. That's what I've seen the most. And this is my classroom. This is the work. We have beautiful art and work on the wall, and just touring their parents around to show them, just to be proud of what they've done so far.
Ownership, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Good for you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Director Huber, I'll come to you, Director.
So how is math tracked in grades K through 3, and can you talk about the coaching and feedback
Yeah.
cycles as that it relates to that? And it seems like is it 2 cycles for all teachers quarterly, or what's the current?
Originally, that's where we were, but we've found that we can do, with Jeff and I able to go in there, we're doing more than that. And so at a minimum 2 per quarter, but like I said, we're already on cycle 3 and many of ours have had even more than that. K3 math, we're using our resources that we have, Eureka. They have beautiful exit tickets, they have end of mod, they have quizzes, they have those things that we are having students take, and then the teachers are gathering their data, and then we're looking at the data at PLCs. And so we're using that. Kindergarten's a little trickier, and I don't know that we've completely found the answer to that, but it's something we're definitely talking about. We are bringing work samples and comparing them. And right now they're the counting, and so it's pretty, they are learning those things, but that's something we're definitely having conversations about.
Data collection in kindergarten is a little more observational,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, TS Goldish, yeah.
But then, Director Huber, bringing that data, teachers are bringing that data to their PLC meetings to analyze, like, what have kids learned, and then how are they adjusting either the intervention or the next instruction to meet whatever the gap is, or if kids already know it, to help them move along a little bit more quickly.
So it sounds like those exit tickets are being tied to the standards, and then
Yes,
is that being tied also to the 2025 agency tool? And then there's I saw an element of peer observation in that as well, so I just had some questions about like, what does that look like when they're-
well, absolutely, and one of the things we really, as a team, as our instructional leadership team worked on was really being, as we're building this culture of trust, is being able to go watch each other. And especially when we bring exit tickets to a PLC and we're like, how did you get those results? What did you do? Come watch me teach it. And so some of those things are happening, grade levels and teacher to teacher. Did I miss anything? Okay, I'm sorry if I did.
Thank you. Dr.
Thank you. I was curious about coaching frequency as well, so great question. Current attendance trends, are you noticing any differences yet?
We put a ton of time and energy into attendance, and our overall attendance has gone up. The area that has us worried is our chronic absenteeism, which is missing 10 days or more. And that's the area that I'd like to get like a group together to help figure out. I know we're not the only school, but we're at 46% of our students are chronically absent. And when you're not at school, if you miss 10 days a year, you've missed 10 days of instruction. And that has been kind of the trend over time at Rogers. And so it's something we've been working on different letters we're sending home, being proactive, offering any services we can possibly offer, wraparound services, and so it's something we have not completely figured out, but we're hacking that problem and trying to see what we can do and what we do have control of.
And also, we actually just talked about this week. Really trying to look at that's a lot of kids that are chronically absent, but how do we understand their story and what is causing them to be chronically absent, and then support the family and the kid in a way that helps address what that problem is. If a kid is sick all the time, okay, do they have to go to the doctor? If the cost of going to the doctor is a barrier to coming back to school, maybe we work with them on what is too sick for school and what is not too sick for school, just as an example.
And every story is very different, but we need to dig into each story and see if we can help.
On a kind of related note, the current, my note to myself is to ask you about the current culture and climate trends, but really I think the team you mentioned in the USIP and in the action plans, can you tell us a little bit more about that, really?
Yeah.
Who's on it in your school and what resources you're using?
Yes, we have two major teams, an instructional leadership team, and then we have this climate and wellness team, and then a little sunshine team that is on the other side of that, which is really important right now. And our climate and our wellness team, we talk about events we're gonna have coming up for parents. That's a big part of it. What we're gonna be doing for children as far, we just had our Hispanic Heritage Night, our Fall Fiesta, what we finally called that. So it's doing some of that planning, because we are a Title I school, but it's also looking at our overall culture for kids and what can we do to really have a positive learning environment for all students. For example, the team really wants to point out when kids are doing a really good job. And so and we have to give Toby a shout out for that. He talked about how he does these golden tickets. And so we decided, we're gonna start giving these golden tickets out. And then we added Roger, the wildcat that you saw a picture of, who's our new mascot. And we have these assemblies in the morning about, okay, our word of the day, our word of the month is caring, and launch it from there with morning meetings every day. And then when we see kids caring, here's your golden ticket, and then we celebrate. So they come up with different things in the building that we can do. Some of them are working on, right now, we're doing a step challenge as a school, and how we can work on self-care as a staff to also take care of one another.
And their IEP.
Oh, did you want to know about instructional, or
You're welcome to touch on it if you like.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
running out of time and I didn't know if anybody else had any other questions.
well, and that team is looking at data. And that team is looking at our practices. We are doing a lot of kick-up, which is giving us a lot of reports that we will then take to the instructional leadership team and look for trends. And then ask the questions of what support is needed and what are we not seeing and what do we need to do for PD to support teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to give a shout out for your Hispanic Festival, Fall Festival.
Thank you for coming to that.
Your community really showed up. I believe you started serving at 5. An hour later, people were still in line. I think you had everybody in the community there. And I want to give you a shout out because as the kids were running around on the stage performance area, when it was time for them to take a seat, your voice came over in a very conversational tone. They all heard you, and they all went back to their parents. It was like,
I was
wow.
amazed as well.
Mr. Green has some magic that we utilize all the time.
When you're looking at your 5E and the school culture, it's easy to see that building that trust will lead to that interaction and that opportunity to cut short the chronic absenteeism because they know this is a place where they want to be and this is where their friends are.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier. So
Thank you for coming too, that was
it
really
was
good to have
excellent,
you.
yeah.
They were good tacos too.
Thank you. I was looking at my calendar. I think the board got an invite for a medieval festival. That's coming up on Friday.
Yes.
That's you. Okay, great. I
Don't
just
be
hope to
jousting.
confirm that. Yeah, awesome. And
Feel free to dress up if you come.
I don't know. That's up to the board members if they want to. But thank you for the invite, and hopefully some of the board members, based on their schedules, will be able to stop by. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for coming
Thank you.
and presenting
Thank
the
you for
data,
that
and also
opportunity.
owning the data that is there. Sometimes on self-reflection, you identify what are the areas that you need to address. And this is not something new that I'm saying to you. There are other principals in the audience. I've repeated the same message. You being a first-year principal and a not a first-year principal, I meant like your school is first time on the watch list. It's really imperative that you get off that watch list on that first year, as opposed to, because the process becomes really convoluted and much more challenging after the first year. Everything that you presented aligns with the district vision and the direction that we are going in. You've got teacher one here, I think it's teacher one, that was identified. Teacher one, by the way, is no longer anonymous.
She would have called it out if I hadn't. So, I'm just kidding. We're really proud of her.
There's a great social media piece too on Miss Flora, so if you haven't seen that on our Instagram and Facebook, please go see it. It's a good celebration of all the
thank
great
you.
things that are happening.
Keep us informed about how things are going. You talked about the chronic absenteeism. You have parent-teacher conferences going on. It's a point in time where you can emphasize to the parents, especially if you are expecting 100% engagement with parents, to let them know how critical attendance is for their students. We need parent support in this. We can make this happen if parents are not supporting kids coming to school. And the last question I have is more directed to David out here. David, that 5 essential survey, since it was presented out here, is that going at this time during parent-teacher conferences?
Yes, the parent link went out this week,
Okay,
and so that's being communicated and used across the
awesome. There was some issues last year, and so we had to wait till spring. I'm glad that it's going out early this time around. So hopefully schools are taking advantage of this during the parent-teacher conferences and encouraging parents to fill that out as they come into our schools. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Superintendent Gall, I will give you an
Nope, I'm
opportunity
good.
to wrap
I wanted to throw in the one thing about for social media, so I'm good.
Yes, been texted to because I ran into one of the people on the strike dance matter. In fact, I ran into a gifted technology teacher who was at our mini any comments? She applied for grants, and she had to go to the.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the middle school accountability update. The board has been having this conversation periodically at our work sessions, and this is the next step in the process. And the board is getting an update on where the district is. Superintendent Gall, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, we had committed to the board last year. We appreciate the board leaning in strongly on the desire for us to codify some of the ways that we are approaching the challenges that really start to amplify at middle school. And we're excited to bring forward the work today. I have Darren Joyner to lead the work, and I have two of our strongest leaders in middle schools, our executive principal and Stephanie Leisure, and our Jenkins Jaguars and Tony Jakinski, of which we will, I'll give the selfless plug, be doing our groundbreaking tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So please join us there for the new academic wing. Darren, over to you.
Thank you very much. So we want to jump right in, just as a quick reminder, how students enter our system and then those supports that we provide our students. Really excited for the work that we did last spring over the summertime to establish the system. You'll hear in a little bit from Principal Leisure, Principal Chakowski, the case studies from our staff, from our students about what that experience feels like on their end. But I want to get into the nuts and bolts, some data, and then we'll turn it over to them. The criteria is very simple. To build it out and to start the system this year, students had to enter with 2 out of 3 criteria. So grades, an F in math or ELA, not and, but an F in math or ELA. Growth being below 35 SGP in STAR or ELA, and then proficiency in STAR, ELA, or math being below approaching. So a really high bar, I would say, which is where you'll see in the data in a little bit why we had such a large percentage of students activated in the system to start the year. The support strategy is very simple, is that when a student enters the system, we have a responsibility and obligation to intervene sooner than what we've done in the past. So on September 10th, we did a data pool to see how many students met that criteria, 2 out of 3. Really at the September 10th point of the year, we're really looking at grades because we've already had our STAR proficiency and growth data from the previous year. And then at the end of the quarter, so our school has just recently received their most recent report for the end of first quarter. Those check-ins happen for a student every week at a minimum. They're focused on work habits, organization, data and goal setting. And then as a student continues in the system, those supports will ramp up as far as frequency and the type of support that we provide them. Other supports that we provide students could be peer mentoring programs, customized class schedules to make sure that they have the right support in their classrooms, could be tutoring opportunities, and then encouraging participation in extracurriculars for that extra layer of accountability, but also that sense of belonging and connectedness to their school. So let's get to the data. 34% of our students qualified using that criteria to start the school year. So as you can see there, 1,368 students out of our 4,019 students qualified according to that September data pool. 133 students, so 12.84% of our students who started in the system did exit the system at the end of first quarter. You might ask yourself, well, how were they able to exit already after first quarter? Grades, right? So some of the students who were in there for grades and one of the STAR criteria, if they ended up with no Fs in math or ELA, they were able to exit the system. This number will dramatically increase as far as the number of students having an off-ramp and exiting the system when we come back to it at the end of second quarter. And the reason for that is because of the middle of the year STAR assessment, where they have the next opportunity to showcase their growth and or their proficiency. So the system is built to onboard students with those weekly check-ins and then exit them, or when they do exit, the frequency goes from once a week to every other week. So even when a student leaves the system, We're not just saying that, congratulations, you're doing great, good luck. We understand that it still takes time for them to establish those habits, those good routines. We'll check in with them less frequently. Eventually, after second quarter of being independent, they will be on their own if they continue to demonstrate success, having exited the system, okay? So at this time, I want to turn it over to Steph. She's going to talk through some case studies. These are anecdotes from staff, from students, to really get into the experience and what our staff and our students are saying about the middle school accountability system.
So I'm going to give you a second, just if you wouldn't mind taking a look, because I'm not going to read for you, but if you would just take a look really quickly, and then I'll kind of summarize, but then give you a few extra anecdotes as well. So I think what you see in these first two pieces are that students are appreciating that there's someone consistently checking in with them extra than their teachers. And they appreciate that there's someone that's consistent on a weekly basis checking in with them. And whether they appreciate it or not, we had a bunch of kids in tears. Good tears? Meh. So here's the thing. Here's what's not bad. There are kids who have good grades, but they don't meet proficiency levels. I'm thinking of one young lady in particular she's lovely. She's great. But she's below approaching. And hasn't met growth. So she's in there, and the impetus for her has been, and I talked with one of my teachers today, one of my 7th grade teachers, and she said, you know what's really helped with this is that it has looped some students in that aren't typical intervention kids. So they're not they're not necessarily set to certain intervention classes, but they are recognizing that they have to get to proficiency at some point. They need to get there. And so she's, as hard as it is to hear that sometimes, that you're not there, it's brought in, okay, so how can we get you there? So the teacher and this young lady, like, we encouraged her, hey, we're gonna be here with you through this. This is not forever. You can earn your way out of this. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. We love you. But we also want to make sure we're pushing you forward. So from that teacher perspective, she just said, I feel like they will actually take STAR more seriously, will know specifically what they can do, because she said in teaching supported classes, a lot of my students, whether they will ever get to that proficiency benchmark or not, they can grow. They should be growing. And a lot of it is because of a lack of, I'm always going to be here. So she's excited. She thinks that this is creating like a little jump start in how they're moving forward through even their assessments.
I want to add one thing. I think that this really demonstrates what Steph is saying is we have gone from such a passive experience for our students to an active experience for our kids, where they care about their data. We're educating them about what these numbers mean and why it's important to them for their future. And so when she talks about these tiers, there's this ownership that they have never had to experience before, because we never had any intentionality around it. I shouldn't say never. In recent years, we haven't had the intentionality around it that we really needed to have, right? And so now the adults are wrapping around these kids. We're providing them with meaningful conversations and goal setting around their data. Okay. Next.
Yeah. Next one, just take a quick this is a little bit about like numbers, and then sort of like then some student, like how they're feeling about the check-ins as well. These case studies highlight just slightly different experience where teachers and counselors are seeing that students are coming a little bit better prepared, like they already know what questions, what the check-ins look like, so already are ready to go with what their grades look like, and are also adding some test-taking strategies or coping strategies, that sort of thing, for how it works in school and in your progress monitoring situations, and then that students are just having, they're starting to experience just a little bit more success in how to-do lists or my action plan helps them proceed. We were similar in ours as far as our numbers are concerned. We have a lot of students who are in our system because of STAR. And their proficiency levels. So we had 15% who also earned their way out because of their grades, and expect to see that number dramatically, that percentage dramatically increase and exit again after the December's testing window. But we also are interested. North has always been a school that schedules students into intervention classes based on their data. So not only that, but I'm excited to be able to. We are piloting a different online support. Mr. always makes fun of us for asking for something new. And we asked for something new, and we're piloting something different. And it is very structured that students have an individual path, and it's related to STAR. So it gives students individual practice based on what their scores look like. So excited to see what that data looks like as well. So I think really the coupling of all these will really help to see that we get students on the right path and moving out of this system.
First of all, thank you for having me here. When we take a look at what we're doing, when I introduced this to the staff, they clapped, applauded, and cheered at the start of the year. They were super excited about this program. One, there's the accountability piece, but there's also the support piece as well, right? We're providing students with the skills to be successful, whether it's executive functioning, whether it's organization, whether it's how to study or take notes. So what's happening through this process is we're identifying the students that truly need that support. Because just as Stephanie shared, there are some students who may have not tried on STAR. And what's going to happen, we're going to weed those students out because, as you see in quote number 2, some of those students simply don't want to be there. They don't want to meet with Tony Jakowski, as awesome as I am, once a week to have a conversation about their goals. So what we're going to see over time is we're going to see a shift of students that really need the support in the program. And this is a structured, intentional program where we're going to identify who those students are and provide them with the supports that they need. So this quarter, it was great. Next quarter, it's going to be 100 times better, and we're really identifying those kiddos that need support. And what's happening is the students who maybe had low self-esteem about a grade or thought they weren't able to succeed or perform, with these supports, they're finding, oh my gosh, you know what? I didn't think I could do this in language arts, as you look at the second quote. And they're performing. And it might be relative to their ability, right? They might go from an F to a D. But with that support from adults, we're helping them grow. And it's creating a positive feedback loop of, okay, you know what, I can do this. And what we're doing through some of our programs as well is we're doing some pre-teaching to help them be successful and continue that loop. In some of the cases, you know, there's those external motivators and their internal and intrinsic motivators as well, whether it's moving off of the program. And in some cases, as you look at the VIP passes of one school doing that, we're doing different things like JAG parties, where if you're showing us growth, achievement, doing better in classes and getting your homework in, we're going to support you in that process and recognize the work. So we're super excited about what we're doing. Kids are recognizing they do have the ability, they're able to do this, and they appreciate the support. And as time goes by, we want to see kids move off, and then we can hone in on more specifics for those individuals. And when we see scenarios where maybe we're not doing something well as a system, how do we incorporate that as a tier 1 strategy in classes across the board? So we've been hugely excited about what we've been able to do. And with this at the forefront and intentional, we're doing it, right? Sometimes what gets measured gets done. And this is the work. Like, this is what we can do and how we can support kiddos. So we're super excited.
So reflections from this first quarter of implementation. The staff are adjusting to their roles and where they fit into this system of accountability. From admin to counselors, getting in, and teachers as well, but getting into, I guess, the right rhythm of, you know, how do you feed this system and make it better for kids? So from the teacher role, you know, many schools have intentional mentorship programs that have started as a result of the system that didn't exist before, and now we have kids with trusted adults having meaningful conversations around their academics and their future. Counselors being on the proactive side of things instead of the reactive side of things when it comes to goal setting, the executive functioning skills, organization, really just helping kids to engage in conversations that they may not have ever had before with their parents or anyone at school. You know, you got 3 missing assignments. Let's develop an action plan this week for how you're gonna get that not only caught up, but how you're gonna stay caught up with this week's work as well, right? Things that we probably took for granted as kids because of our support systems that we had, that not all of our kids have, you know, at their disposal. Common formative assessments need to have a place in the system to create an off-ramp for students. So we received that board feedback as we were developing it last spring and summer. We weren't in a place that we felt as a system just yet at that moment in time to have that as part of our criteria, that body of evidence for a student to enter the system, but also to exit the system. But now I will say that we are very confident as a middle school group in talks with the principals of adding that as part of the body of evidence. So Eureka end of module assessments, CKLA end of unit assessments. I can see that entering the discussion it already has at our previous middle school principals meeting. We're going to start to figure out what are the metrics, how do we build that in to make sure that students have shorter time span between STAR. As you can see, there's a gap there, right, that we recognize beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. It's just a long time when 2 out of the 3 criteria to either enter or exit take place, right? And so, you know, as a middle schooler, we want to make sure that we're incentivizing and motivating students, giving them opportunities to show that, you know what, I really don't belong there. Let me show you that I can be proficient on the next Eureka test or the next CKLA assessment. Now I'm going to turn it back to Tony because I want him to share a spot. They're going to be our spotlight here for this month when it comes to how they're implementing the system, how they got enthusiasm around the middle school accountability system. Tony?
Thank you. Teachers bought in from the get-go, right? And that's exciting because we already have the buy-in to what we're gonna do. And again, I talked about it being the right work, right? Really supporting kids in real time. We're meeting with these students on a weekly basis, right? So it's not 2 weeks to get a test back or half a year to get CMAS back. It's, I met with you on Thursday, I'm meeting with you again the following Thursday. So we're looking at grades, we're looking at tests, we're looking to see where the zeros are, and they're getting immediate feedback and immediate support through that process. And again, it's real time or as close to real time as possible. In addition, some of those students are, for lack of a better word, embarrassed about being there, right? They have straight A's and maybe they didn't try on the last STAR exam. So those kids are gonna naturally come off, and then we're able to identify those kids that truly need support. Some things we're doing in real time and looking at the data is we're getting them supports right away. Is there a student that maybe is struggling at home? We're gonna connect them with a mentor in the building, right? But through these weekly conversations, that might have taken a month to find out. We're finding out within days, right? And we're getting them the supports earlier and faster and more intentional through this process. One of the other things that we did this year is through looking at our data on a weekly basis, we're seeing that there's some skill gaps with our kiddos in regards to math. And we have been reactive in our plans with our interventions, and why not be proactive? So one of the adjustments we made, and we're piloting in 4 classes during our JAG time period, which is really an intervention time, is we're giving the pretest through Eureka to see where those skill gaps are. And the goal is to really support those kids in learning where those gaps, or not learning where the gaps are, but identifying where those gaps are for the adults and then teaching those skills, right? Because if I'm not able to do this, I can go back to 3rd grade and I didn't learn a skill here that's preventing me from doing this. So now we fill in that gap. Now when we get to that module assessment, the teaching, the learning portion, we may have identified that gap, filled it in. Now that student tastes some success, right? And we're hoping that's a positive feedback loop. Oh my gosh, I didn't think I could do it because I didn't know this. I have a C now, look, I have a C, and just continuing to build that. So we're excited about that intervention for our kiddos, but I think the major piece here is just real-time pieces with an adult that's looking you in the face and saying, how can I help you, how can I support you, what do you need? And that's, that's hard to turn away, whether you have the skills or don't. So those are some of the pieces that we're doing, and I can share more, but I know you have other pieces tonight, but feel free to ask me questions or send me an email.
Yeah, let's wrap it up first. You have one more slide.
Last slide here, very quick. Future work, the gradebook guidelines, this was one of the unintended consequences.
You can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. This was one of the unintended consequences of the middle school accountability system. As we started into the conversations around criteria, like we shared with the board back in May, It was obvious that there's inconsistency across the system in the way that we're grading and in every content area. So we will be focusing in our middle school principal level meetings on how do we get consistency across the board, though, when it comes to how do we weight our grade books, the do's and don'ts of what should be in a grade book, and then making sure that what's in the grade book is connected to standards. And then the idea of the middle school academy build out, we have our initial design lab scheduled to begin in November. So we'll have more updates on that in future board work sessions, and then more conversations around that criteria and making adjustments to add those common formative assessments around Eureka and CKLA.
Are we good? You're done. Okay. I saw your hand go up, so let's open it up for both discussion and feedback at this time. Director Huber, you being first.
As you guys are considering gradebook guidelines, I know one time I got some middle schoolers at various schools, and there was a time where there was like, they get a 1 out of 4 even if they haven't turned in an assignment. And I'm like, has that been corrected? When we were talking about, 15% of these students are earning at their way out, is that correct? When they have F grades, is it 15%?
We had 15%. We were roughly at, I think, 12 to 13%
District was
as a whole.
12.8 as a whole.
Oh, yes. So that means like 80-something% of students didn't.
Yes, and it was mostly, a lot of those are related to STAR.
Okay.
Because they haven't been able to take it again, so there's a lot of students
So
in the system because of STAR for
So
sure.
it's not 15 just based on the Fs?
Right.
Okay. And then, so all of those students are having weekly meetings with you at your school?
We divided them among counselors and administrators.
Okay. And then, so has the system of needing a higher level of rigor been fixed? It seems to me like it'd be hard to get an F if they can get a 1 out of 4 on assignments, if they're turning them in or not. And if they have unlimited amount of time to turn those things back in. So I've noticed a big kind of gap when I'm having different kids come into my home, trying to teach them, high school is gonna have a different standard for you. You're not gonna have unlimited time to turn stuff in. You're not gonna have people giving you credit for just being in the classroom. Has that been addressed? Do students still get credit for assignments that they haven't done? Are they still kind of being carried through the system?
That's part of the inconsistency across the system,
Right.
right? And so that is an area that we'll absolutely talk through as a team.
So it sounds
It's a
like
great
not
point.
quite yet, but you're
No,
getting
not
there. Yeah.
That's our future work ahead, is there is still
Really
great
passionate about that one.
inconsistency
So,
across the system.
But you're highlighting the experience from a student and a parent perspective that we will absolutely be taking into account when we're having discussions, right? You're hitting on the points that we need to be tighter on.
And then for you, do you go to multiple schools? Are you just centered at North? How does that work?
She's at North, I'm at Jenkins, at Doherty, and Jenkins at Jenkins.
Okay, I thought you were at more than one place, so.
No,
just-
well, I call it.
He is.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that was my main question, and then how they're getting those executive functioning skills was my other question. Sorry.
Ours is through our discovery class, so we have an intervention, much like like Tony's JAG time. Ours is called discovery, so we're pretty targeted, so ours we do second step one day, it's every day. So we do second step one day, which does some SEL, but does some executive functioning as well. And we do this IXL, which is that pilot I was telling you about, in ELA and math, right?
Familiar with that one, yep.
Yes. And then Wednesday, we do our progress monitoring. So checking grades, setting goals, doing action plan, that sort of thing. So that happens every week for kids outside of even this. And then Friday, we do IB. So, yeah, so.
That's all my questions.
Thank you. Director Carey.
Can you go to slide 3? So this, you had mentioned earlier that they meet with a combination of you and counselors and other administrators. I just want to ask that same idea more broadly, because here it mentions, mentorship programs, specialized instruction, tutoring opportunities. So I wanted to ask, who is doing those extra interventions and where are you finding the time to do those extra interventions?
Sure, so we have a tutoring program already, so through this process, we may recommend a student to that tutoring program. A lot of what we're doing is already in place. We're adjusting sort of the focus a little bit, so that one intervention I talked about at Jenkins, now that's solely for kids who have been identified in this program. But in some cases, if we've identified a mentor or that student would benefit from a mentor, we're reaching out to a veteran teacher that builds relationships and asking that person to meet with that kiddo. So it really depends on the need of the child, and then we look at the resources available.
Ours is slightly different. So as I described, just that discovery process, the students who are assigned to an intervention class are in discovery for a specific class, so for math or ELA. So instead of having that structure that I just described, they do their intervention from a math or an ELA teacher 4 days a week, and then they do progress monitoring /IB on the 5th day of the week. So we have 2 teachers per grade level that teach an intervention class daily.
And we're in the same boat, and we use CMAS data, Eureka data, and also STAR data to identify where those kids go. And then we look to see where the skill gaps are, and then those teachers are explicitly teaching that skill during that JAG time that's once a day, or a period a day.
Is it accurate to say that every middle school kind of has their own approach for solving those particular problems based on the resources they have in the building and the schedules that they have?
Yes.
That's an accurate
So I'm sure you're doing this already, but I would just strongly encourage you to share ideas that worked between middle school principals, because I think this is one of the hardest things about education, where we talk a lot about tier 1 instruction, but it's hard for students to get things out of tier 1 instruction if they're missing a bunch of, kind of the fundamentals leading up to it. And then you have this problem of, how do I make up the gaps while also keeping the actual grade level standards moving ahead at full steam? And so as you all are kind of working through ideas, if you find things that work, spread those ideas around. I know this is future work, but I want to actually ask about the same thing that Amanda did. Do you have any preliminary thoughts about what kind of gradebook guidelines you're interested in? Is this a place where you would like the board to weigh in with opinions, or is this a place where you'd like us to kind of stay out of your chili?
Yeah, I think we want to go through another semester. Let's get through mid-year to understand if we're measuring with a micrometer and cutting with an axe. So I don't want to go on an edict that says no classroom can have more than 3% available in extra credit activity, to then find out that a third of our kids are meeting 2 of those criteria. So right now, what we're solving for, go back to the criteria slide, is a third of our kids, particularly if you take the STAR data, are at a 35 or below, or are in the below approaching category, and or have an F as a grade. Yes, we need some standardized grading practices. That is an opportunity for us to lean in, but I think that's gonna be the difference between an A student actually then getting a 12 or 1300 on the SATs or pre-SATs as they make their way up there. Does the grade translate into the equivalency of how other people measure us? Right now, this is a bottom-up measure and reaction. There is an opportunity, but I think we want to hold off and see, do we clean up 3/4 of this list by mid-year? If so, then yes, we need to get some standardized practices within our gradebook. If not, the gradebook's not the problem. The gradebook is not the problem. So I think we just need a minute longer to decide how to come back on that.
Are you good?
Good for me.
Dr. Jurgensen.
When you notified these 1,300 students, a third of the students, did you also notify parents and saying, hey, we've identified, and so parents are aware that, okay, and then I guess probably something to still cook out here is, we do all these interventions, we have this extra, support, and we've got maybe 600 kids at the end of the year who go into the next year. And then when they go into the next year, it's more long-term planning, are we planning for something like, man, we just can't get these kids caught up, but we don't feel good about sending them to high school? Is that still in the works, or?
I think that's understanding students and their situations, and so I'm going to start with students on a plan, so an IEP student, right? Are we delivering what's in the plan? Are there other supports that we need to build into that plan? Same with a student on a 504, right? Or even ELL students. Everyone's got a story to them, right?
Absolutely.
The thought of retaining 600 students, right? Is that a student issue as much as it is a school system issue? I think that what we're trying to say right now with the implementation of the system is, we need to look at what we're doing first as adults to support our kids. This isn't all on the kids. And so over time here, that's why the middle school design process for the academy idea is gonna be very powerful as far as deciding, what do we do to support our students in-house next year? Or is there another idea beyond serving students in our school that we need to pursue?
Okay. Yeah.
That's our reality, right, is
Yeah.
you see that number and you're like, oh my gosh, 1,300
Third
kids.
of our kids, yeah.
And we'll celebrate if we get to 600, but we need to get to 0.
Right.
That's the reality, is we have to get to 0.
Well, I appreciate having a plan and putting it in place and moving resources around. I appreciate all that, so thank you for being here tonight.
It looks like in November, you're going to have a task force talking about the middle school academy as well. That's what you talked about.
We're gonna run that through our design lab with middle school principals and a few other folks here to talk about what that might look like for next year.
Director Bankus.
And I have 2 questions. Did I hear early on when you started to speak that this program was for kids that you thought, you being teachers, thought would benefit from it, and if children just didn't buy in at all, that they would not be part of it?
No.
Okay.
We had teacher buy-in very early on, which always helps the process, but with students who may not buy in, we would work with them to support them, even if they weren't particularly happy with that.
It's a whole different set of interventions.
Yes. And then is Avid still available, and is that a side-along program, or does this replace Avid, or?
So that's really a site-based decision. There are a few schools who still utilize Avid. Some are Avid school, or I think we have one Avid school in our district still.
Galileo.
Yep, and that's correct, Galileo.
And it's not.
And you might see some Avid strategies being implemented in our support classes, but it's not a strategy that we utilize district-wide in our middle schools.
Yeah, to double down, Avid is an acceptable program. This isn't anything new. This is us just being very intentional. And instead of, I heard the word passive to active, that's really the switch that we made at the direction of the board that said we can no longer continue to push non-achieving or growing children into high schools without a greater depth of understanding where those gaps are and what we're gonna do about it. And so there are differences at the schools level because each one of our schools has their own personality and has their own way that they do go about it. What we wanted was a consistent set of guardrails that said, here's what our expectations are, that building leaders can then rally their teams around the things that do work better in their buildings and for their kids. And so Avid does remain a tool in someone's toolkit, but what we decided to not do for a variety of reasons was say, this is the way that you're gonna do this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other feedback, Dr. Rock?
I recall when Holmes and Swigert had their school within a school type of academies for some of the students with some more significant challenges. And so that might be something to remember when you're doing your design lab, is that some of those folks have already been there and worked on that. I do remember that, speaking of like time, energy, resources, that it was a little more intensive financially. And so my question kind of related to Director Carey's was the financial side of it, and if this is costing us more, and or if there are resources that need to be adjusted in the next budget.
Great point. I do want to speak to that. I think that's with the flexibility of our school-based budgeting processes. You know, we're first going to look and see if there are opportunities, though, for us to handle that in-house at our school site before we tap into and ask for additional resources. And I know that that'll come up in our design lab process. That'll be a big part of our conversation is what can we handle in-house versus is there something beyond our school that we need to tap into. Yeah, good point though. And to your point though, we have 2 schools with a history of doing something in-house, right? So how do you take a model like what they implemented and replicate it possibly?
When those did come from additional support from the district though?
It did not. No, they were able to handle that in-house. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although I think Swigert wound up dropping theirs because they could not afford it.
That's
But
correct. That happened the year that I came in, because I remember seeing Jim Nason talk about that on the tapes that I watched for the interview process. And then when I got here, I thought it was something that was there and it wasn't there anymore. So it is a consideration for us as we get forward, move forward with the Academy's idea. And there's a quarterly update we'll be back to the board with our next update after we can process the mid-year data, so it'll come in January. As part of the mid-year data update, there'll be a specific section on the middle school accountability.
It's very encouraging, so, yay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? The board has clearly indicated, and this board especially, that we need to do something, that we can no longer remain passive. And that was the word that you used, moving from passive to active. So many of our middle school students are falling behind without that accountability in place, and then they get pushed to the next grade and the next grade, and then end up at high school several grades behind. That no longer is acceptable. This is the first step in the process. So I'm glad that this is being communicated to the students, and students are taking an active role in their learning themselves, and parents are involved as part of the process as well. So Superintendent Gall, the question to you, at this point in time, is there any action that you want from the board, or?
No, we'll come back in January and we'll have, if we need more action from the board, it will be in our recommendations. But one, I think really getting our arms around the size of the problem. I didn't think when we put that criteria out there that any of us really thought it would be consistently a third of our kids. It's almost exactly a third of the kids way across. Sixth graders are a little less identified in that, obviously, because they don't have a chance to have an F in math or an ELA yet. And also maybe our elementary strategies are working. But the size of the problem is pretty large. And I would just hats off to particularly Darren Joyner for the work that he's done in stepping back into a middle school role and harnessing the middle school leaders together. And to all our middle school leaders that are here that are listening, we started in middle school in this idea of how do we really get after this problem, because they both, they have an input and an output. Everybody else is either on the front end or the receiving end. In the middle school space, we thought if we could show and demonstrate that even in the very quickest of win, that I know it's only 12% of the third that have already exited, we got in kids opportunities of how to get them more focused and immediately made that course correction. That one small group of cohort of kids says, okay, I'm back. And it's kind of like, we all know in middle school, kind of follow their eyes in the hallway, and if you can just get them for a second, they go, okay, Principal Leisure, I got you, I'm on track again. So I think what we can demonstrate here can then bleed into our elementary and particularly in our secondary, because we do still have a lot of kids that make their way into high school that are not prepared for it, and what we don't have is the answer for what we do when we get there. So those probably high school will be the next place that we come back to the board. It might take us the full course of this year to to look for those recommendations, so we make sure that we don't fire first and ask questions second.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the feedback, appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and we look forward to further updates as they come along.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a draft policy IJ, instructional materials and library resources, selection, adoption, acquisition, and reconsideration. As part of looking into the entire I-Series policies, we talked about this as a board at the board retreat, and Director Jurgensen and Director Hafley offered to bring a recommendation to the board at some point in time. And so Director Jurgensen is bringing certain revisions to policy IJ. I will turn it over to, are you going to go Dr. X first, or? Okay, Director Jurgensen. So Director Jurgensen will set up this conversation, and then as necessary, I'll reach out to you to Superintendent Gall. So Director Jurgensen, if you can update the board on where things are at this time and what is it that you are bringing to the board at this point in time. Thank you.
Yeah, so in the retreat in August, we mentioned looking at the I-Series block, which is the instructional block of policy. There's a lot of things that we can kind of consolidate and be more clear in our continued efforts to move policy from over 400 policies to the more 30,000 foot view of governance, and then allowing the superintendent and their team to operationalize our wishes as a governing team. So when we look at this I-Series, the one we looked at with Greg and Dr. X and Director Hafley, is draft IJ. Originally, we had IJL, and then talking with Dr. X, we mentioned, being able to clean up some exhibit pieces and keeping a couple of the other policies in place. And the more Greg looked at it, he was mentioning, look, if we already have, this used to be one policy, and it's broken apart over time to meet needs, and as technology, media, internet, things like that all came about. So his idea was, what if we looked at a policy that could bring everything for all of our instructional material together? And so I said, okay, well, that'd be, we had to edit the IJL that I first showed Director Hafley and Greg. And so we went to work on that. And so that now is able to, assuming approval with some edits of whatever the board would like, we're gonna be able to consolidate about 11 I policies down to this one IJL, with then the effort of tasking Mike and his team with the regulation series for this policy. So this new IJ policy gives administration and families a clear and direct line to one policy. So in the past, they had to, what is it for online media? What is it for library? What is it for, movies and things like that? So one clear policy for families, also one clear policy for our admin team. They're not having to bounce around and look at different policies. Dr. X got feedback from Chief Rasmussen about having one policy instead of multiples, and that was appreciated. So this is something that I think will be easy for our admin and our teachers to use as well. If you remember, we already have security for our staff and students, whether it's blocked websites or guidelines or buffers so students are staying on task at school. And really this policy is consolidating and then adding language to help keep our students safe in this media aspect as well for everything. So again, keeping in line with that 30,000 foot view to guide instructional materials for all students in D11 is our aim here. Let's see if I have some other notes here before we get into it. So again, one singular policy that we're presenting here tonight, and that's what we're looking at. It also adds some definitions that were not there in the past to help align the media content of our libraries and schools with the educational merit that we want to expect in our schools. So this doesn't stop libraries from having various history books. We've gotten some emails already about taking out history and underrepresented people groups. This has nothing to do with that. This is purely about putting all of our media policy in one place for online, for in print, for anything that a student's going to access, making it easier in that regard. So we are ensuring a way to protect students, just like we have already done online, from other obscenities or pornographic content that they might be exposed to in our libraries and classroom collections. And so with that, I'll maybe see if Dr. X wants to add anything, and then we can do what you'd like, President.
I think what I would add is that there are obviously some statutorial requirements for the board in terms of what their responsibilities are for adopting texts and also for and also for taking a look at the material that is in libraries and in curriculum. Prior to this start of the school year, CASB had sent out a recommendation in one of their bulletins saying that we recommend that you adopt an IJ policy. Prior to that, it was optional until the state legislature got involved and passed a law in 2025. It was enacted May 1st that said by September 1st, you must legally have a policy IJ. If you already have a process and a policy in place, this doesn't apply to you. So this is why the board did not see us bring this forward prior to September 1st to make some of those changes. So there is a legal framework to have a policy. That policy is IJ. There is a subsequent policy which is KEC, which is for parents and community to address concerns that they have. That policy is not required by law by the state of Colorado, and that policy we would bring forward after the adoption of this new IJJ and potentially a regulation or a standard operating procedure, which we would then tie into KEC with revisions. So that's just providing a little context that there is legal grounds to have a policy IJ. And that although there's a deadline of September 1st, we do not have to meet that deadline because we already have a current policy on the books.
So I know the board has received several emails from community members already about the subject matter to the community. This is the first work session that the board is discussing about this policy. We will engage in a rigorous conversation this evening and then figure out the next steps. Director Jurgensen, from what I understand, and Dr. X, you can also correct me, what is in front of the board right now is to repeal 3 policies, IJJ, IJL, IJNC, and all the regulations and attachments or exhibits that go along with those policies. And what is being proposed is this draft policy IJ to replace those 3 policies and then direct the superintendent to adopt, to come up with the standard operating procedures or regulations that align with the 30,000 feet level, what's being stated in this policy. Would that be a fair summary?
I think you did well.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will open it up for questions or comments from the board and discussion about this, about the board, from the board on this subject matter. Who wants to go first? Director Ott.
I have a lot to say about it. And some of my concerns are reflected in the many, many emails we've received on the policies. But the most important thing, I think, that the board might not have seen the email that came about 1 o'clock today from CASB. And they are now recommending that there be, yes, a policy IJ, but also a policy IJL, and that we separate the instructional and the library materials. So that's pretty key. I also think with IJ as written, we need to go back, and I think CASB is probably addressing this in their version, but the law addresses changes such as only, if I've read it right, again, it's just a quick look this afternoon, only parents, maybe students, can.
Parents in the district.
Parents in the district, yes, an excellent point, can ask for reconsideration of materials. And so that's pretty key. Some of the other things, for me, the transparency aspect of allowing community to come in and look at the materials that we are offering, that has been an excellent opportunity for awareness. And this version says that it may occur that we will consult people. So I'm troubled by that. And I think there are so many things here. I would be happy to share my list with you. I'll run down the titles. The student interest and needs in IJL as we have it. It talks about meeting the needs of students, and I think that's very key, and that's been completely left out. Professionalism, it now says professional personnel are going to recommend. I think that's pretty key, that it should be librarians when we're talking about our library material, and people with curriculum background for the professionals that are suggesting our instructional side. The inclusion, I think we can come back to maintaining the balanced collection with the diversity of appeal and different points of view. That's mentioned in IJL, and the historically underrepresented and marginalized voices. Because if we don't call it out, some of us are going to get erased. And I think we need to keep that in mind. The innovation aspect, how the proposed policy leaves out the option for school personnel to request temporary approval to track the effectiveness of alternative instructional resources. And so if this board is interested in continuing innovative little experiments, side experiments, we want to keep that, I think. I mentioned the review up front for selection of materials, and are doing that every 6 months seems reasonable. That's how I feel, at least having been around here for a while. Hopefully that's reasonable still for staff. When it comes to reconsideration, I wrote down a quote. The objectivity side of it, IJL right now ensures decisions are based on professional selection criteria, literary merit, and educational support, not solely on ideological or political pressure. That was from one of our letters that we received, and it seems very reasonable. There's also an issue of timeliness. If the board is going to look at materials by itself with not the literary background or any experience in why a particular set of materials was chosen or a particular book, and we're doing that every 6 months, that's not quite as timely as the current setup that we have, which is of course in regulation, not our own policy. So just thinking back to governance versus policy, we have left that in the purview of the superintendent. And it just seems more efficient. Otherwise, I'm worried we're all gonna every 6 months get, here's 20 books that you should review. And I don't know about you all, I'd wanna review the majority of the material or all of it, and that's a lot of reading. So just a thought. I mentioned the legal clarification as well, that we wanna make sure we're meeting the new law, and also the definitions of obscene and pornography. I think they could be left out and instead just leave a legal reference. The new CASB policy, I did see where they talk about the definition of obscene as defined in law. So I think just leave it at that, because that might change too. So those are, I just threw a whole bunch of things at you. I have a couple technicalities, of course, different.
Okay, I know that you brought a lot of things to the table.
Yes.
One clarification I wanted to come to Dr. X first. Did this go to legal by any chance before it came in front of the board? Did they have a?
I did not.
Okay, great. So at some point in time, we will go through that process. Director Bankus.
So I have a few things. So when you earlier on, and it's a discussion, and I appreciate us being able to do this in a work session, because it's not a one-time, this is how it's going to be and we move on. And this is going to be a lively opportunity for us to really get some clarity on the direction in which we want to go. So let me just start with the library resource selection, adoption, whatever. I also looked it up, and I don't see where it said that it should be separated out. It has its own IJL, but when I'm looking at it, I don't see anything that says that it has to be separated out from the IJ.
Is that a CASB recommendation that came?
Yes.
What's that?
That came through today at 1:00, CASB's email. So, I mean, any of us could be forgiven for not having checked our email and dug into it, but I was just looking at my email at the right time.
Well, I thought it did come up today. And it gave us a link.
Yes.
And after I had to go through.
Did you click on it?
Yes, I clicked on that. The one that says access the special policy update here. And that's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And so that's what's on my,
in the policy
and
update.
it's got IJL, but in no place does it say, at least I didn't see it, that it has to be one. So when I looked at the proposed draft, so that was one thing. When I looked at the proposed draft, and I'll just go back to a different screen. Hold on just a second. Let me just find it here. When I go back to the draft where under definitions of obscene and pornography, I did a computer search, and it seems like, based on prior court decisions, there's a Miller test, not to be confused with Brad Miller, but a Miller test. And so there are 3 points. One is to consider whether the average person looking at the whole work, so you can't just pick out a piece, which means I would have to go back to a book a graphic novel that's currently available, I understand, in our high schools, and go beyond that one page that I found so offensive. I'll have to make sure that I read through the whole book, because this first test on the Miller criteria is that you have to look at the whole work. The second one is applying contemporary standards in the community, and would they find it lascivious? And I think that when we are a school district within a state that has local control, we do have to make sure that we are in tune with our community and that we are reflecting what the direction in which our community wants to go. And so I'll choose something that's not quite so controversial, and that was Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. So if you know about the Lorax, and it's taught in middle school, part of an environmental unit, and it is about cutting down trees and wiping out forests. Well, there's a town in, I don't know, Washington, Oregon, where they have a mill and they have their economy based on forestry. They didn't want that in their community. So when I see that it's standards in their own community, I can understand why it would vary. Within our community, when we take a look at what our community is looking for, we get our emails. We are in election season. People are out there talking, knocking on doors. They're getting feedback through that. And every other way. I do take the newspaper, so there's always letters to the newspaper. And the next one is material in question is of serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And of course, the fourth one would be, does it apply to our standards? So that's the Miller's test. And when I look at these, it really speaks to me under the obscenity and the pornography one, applying contemporary standards in our community. And what our community expects out of their library. The other thing, on this same note, the other thing that came through in my research was First Amendment rights. And my opinion is there's not settled law. But the latest one that I came up with or found, which was in Florida, and it's recent as opposed to 1932, and that is First Amendment rights on a case that was brought by a couple of authors whose book was taken out of a library, I'm assuming in an elementary school, because it talked about penguins. The court ruling on that one was the First Amendment rights in school public libraries are not public. School libraries are not public forums, and curating books is not a violation of free speech. So there's some guidance there that says, again, we can go back to what our community, and we represent our community because they elected us, what our community would say are standards that we would abide by. So while these obscenity and pornography definitions are pretty specific, I also think that it gives us a board as an opportunity to say that we are going to be intentional about what it is that we're going to allow in and out of our libraries. I don't know if any of you remember a school board here in Colorado when they had this issue come up to them, couldn't define pornography. The response from somebody on the board was, I know it when I see it. That is so inappropriate. So I think that we do need to have some specifics here on how we're going to define materials that we would include or not include based on what's being presented to us. I'll stop there.
Okay.
You had some more points and I really wanted to talk about it, but I didn't take them down.
I'm writing things down and there is a whole bunch of things, this is the first step in the process that we are doing.
Right.
It's a draft policy that's in front of the board, and I appreciate Director Jurgensen and Director Hafley putting in the work to bring something in front of the board, and now it starts the conversation, whether it's with the board or the community itself, giving us feedback. And to what you said, that we represent the community as elected members, and we got to reflect the values of the community as a local school board. Director Jurgensen, okay, go ahead.
Before I relinquish the floor, so CASB had a workout session at their fall conference, book bans and curriculum selection. Who decides what students learn? And so this was out of Greeley Evans, and it was 3 attorneys and 1 superintendent from Greeley. And in the legal framework, in a court case that they cited, was the board appointed a book review committee consisting of 4 parents and 4 staff to recommend whether the books should be retained, taking into account the book's educational suitability, good taste, relevance, and appropriateness to age and grade level. We haven't talked about age-appropriate material, but I think it was mentioned. I've read too much. It's in here somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the
It's
first.
an IJ, oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, it's in the first 6 bullet points there that
Yeah.
should be age-based.
Thank you. And so I also went back to the material that we got from CASB during that workout session, and they did go ahead and curate their library inventory to reflect the community standards. I guess that's the way I want to say it. Thank you. Now I'm done.
Thank you. So before I'll come to you, Director Carey had his hand up to Director Jurgensen in response to what Director Art brought up, and also some of the community emails that we've been receiving. The intent behind what you are bringing up in front of the board at this time, it is to consolidate some of these policies to make sure that it's not as convoluted or confusing as it is right now with so many different policies and attachments and regulations, to simplify that process. And also, as far as what is it that we are curating or reconsidering in our libraries, it is not something like revisionist history or any of those kind of things that you are talking about. You might be better in explaining what the intent behind bringing this policy is, so there is some clarity.
Yeah, I mean, just to, in the K-5 space, if you want to show a PG movie, a parental guidance movie, we have to send a permission slip home to our kids, to the parents to sign, to see a PG movie. I didn't realize kids watch PG-13 and above and beyond and all that at home. That's, again, when they're in our hands, parents and guardians are making us responsible for their children's education. So the fact that we've got permission slips for PG videos or in our instructional spaces, but we potentially have material that is obscene or pornographic or not age appropriate in those same K-5 libraries, or heaven forbid a classroom where a teacher chooses to bring even more pieces of material to their classroom resources, this is what we're using to align that. So one thing that I think that Director Out, to your point, one piece that is missing here is the regulation that we'll have to task the superintendent with. And that'll be this superintendent and any superintendent in the future until another board wants to redo things. But giving the superintendent those 30,000-foot guardrails, as Director Bankus mentioned, so that they know how to build that review process. And the hopes are that we would come to agreement in some sort of sentence that talks about tasking the superintendent, or even it could be a line in this policy that says, superintendent and or designated personnel, which would be anybody qualified to handle that space. If it's not going to be just some ESP or somebody that's reviewing things, so there's going to be probably a chief of curriculum or chief of something that's going to be looking at things. So to that point that you mentioned about just having it being personnel, but that just says, hey, we're going to have an ability to have some sort of scale system or grading system that says these aren't appropriate at the K-5 level, but maybe they're okay at the middle school and high school. And that'll be up for the superintendent and his team to decide. So that when we get to those twice a year pieces of reconsidering materials, there might be very few because we're constantly looking at that, again, with the guidance of one policy to look at for everything. So,
Thank you for that feedback. I know that a couple of people, and I saw your hand up to Director Carey or Director Hafley. Who wants to go first?
Okay, don't come to me yet.
Director
I'm still
Hafley.
thinking.
I'd like to piggyback off of Director Bankus a little bit, addressing the ongoing discussion about this book issue. I've heard from a few people who I've spoken to in person beyond the emails. And I would like to assure everyone, we are not banning books. Unfortunately, there are some individuals trying to incite others with non-factual information, and that's regrettable. So I would like to go on record to clarify exactly what's happening, and I would encourage everybody to do their own research and their own due diligence regarding this matter. But for the record, there's no bonfire in the parking lot. There's nobody out there marching around enforcing censorship. The issue at hand is about age appropriateness in our public school libraries. Certain books simply contain material that's not suitable for children or teens in a school setting. If parents want their children to access that type of content, they have every right to do so. And they can do that through public libraries or they can do that through online sources. But our responsibility as a district is to ensure that the materials available in our schools align with community standards and age-appropriate learning. Taxpayers in this district have made it clear they don't want vulgar, graphic, or sexually explicit material in the schools they fund. I'm one of those taxpayers. We're not trying to erase ideas, stifle discussion. We're simply trying to maintain appropriate boundaries for what belongs in a K-12 educational environment. Children are already exposed to far too much inappropriate content through the internet and media. And our schools should be a refuge from that. Should be a place where students can learn, think, and grow without being confronted with explicit or disturbing material. That's the intent. And that's the position I stand by.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity. Dr. Carey.
Just a quick question first. You have kind of a description of the process for a optional semi-annual reconsideration on the level of the board, where, you know, parents, guardians, you say community members. I just looked at the text of the bill and it does pretty clearly say that it needs to be a parent of
the district.
Yeah. But so they bring forward specific titles. You have to include the rationale. You have to reference these specific object level passages. Arguments are heard in public session. So that's one process. Is our expectation that there will then be regulations for requests for reconsideration outside of those semi-annual windows?
I don't think there is, no, but there would be the task to Mike and his team to use whatever the grading scale is aligned to this policy to go, okay, we've got, 3 books in the K-5 level that don't align with this new policy, and so we're gonna pull them off the shelves. Or we've got 1 book in middle school that doesn't align with this new policy based on the system that he and his team create. That rates it, that would align with this policy. So that, again, so the point being that we're not bombarded, as Director Ott mentioned, with, 40 books twice a year, it would be that there is some sort of scale that's built into regulation that would say, okay, it's, there's gotta be book rating scores out there or some sort of rating system already. I would assume it's not something we admit.
And that would be something we would look into. I'll provide a little more context real quickly. Understand that when IJLC, IJNC, IJL, the ones we placed into the packet this evening were placed in there for reconsideration to be repealed and brought down. Superintendent Gall has realigned the district to be laser focused on instruction, and with that comes some realignment of departments, where we used to have some pretty large departments that could take care of some of this approval and some of we've realigned those resources to be under the chief of curriculum and the chief of instruction. And that realignment brings all of these items into one scope. And that's why when we discussed this, I recommended doing just one IJ for our team to say this is all of our materials and all of those materials that we put in front of students. This is the overarching. And then we'll have a regulation. So the regulation will come. It looks exhaustive, and I know the emails are saying, well, they're getting rid of this, they're getting rid of this, they're getting rid of this. Many of those elements will fall into an operating procedure or a new regulation. They just will not be, they'll be more transparent for the public when somebody wants to look at resources and somebody says, well, that's not really a textbook, that's a library resource. So you need to go into this whole nother realm of process and regulation.
Process.
This will all bring it under one umbrella. And really, I spoke again with Chief Rasmussen this morning. We're just waiting on the guidance to make the regulation laser focused to the intent of the board.
Okay. Does that help, Thomas?
I don't know, I'm still thinking.
I think you can use the last briefing as an example. The board made it very clear that we needed a new set of ideas in driving a different experience at the middle school level. And then even the questioning was from Director Bankus, are we using Avid? Maybe, maybe not. That's an operational decision within one of our 9 middle schools to be able to do. Your intent as communicated, or as I heard, and I appreciate Dr. X's summary is to put an overarching statement of the board is responsible for resources that are in our buildings. Now then I would take much of what is existing in the current policy and turn it into an operationalized regulation. Clearly, we have to come and give a recommendation to the board. Right now, the way that stuff is written is it doesn't really give the board the authority. And I think you're looking for a set of authorities as the elected officials in the city to actually deliver for what you have been elected to do.
Out of curiosity, IJLR outlines kind of a whole process when a request for reconsideration is made. Has anyone used that process in the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah. I mean, it goes like step M and then the step P and like, so
And
detailed.
Director Huber is saying yes.
Okay. Personal experience?
Okay.
Not personally.
Well, it looks like the process that is in place right now goes step by step. It's first goes to the principal and then admin, and just layers of it before eventually it may come to the board.
I don't think we've had one come to the board.
No, we haven't
in
had
the
anything come to
last 3 years.
last 6 years, I can say, in the time that Jason, and probably last 8 years in the time that Director Art has been on the board as well. Dr. Carey, are you good at this time?
Yeah, at this time.
Okay, Director Huber.
Say thank you for continuing to simplify policies to make it easier for admin and teachers. And what we don't want to see, it sounds like we don't want additional barriers for teachers to bring in supplementary materials, kind of have a more simplified process to where we can understand what needs to be done. I have seen concerning content and want to reduce those barriers for bringing things to the classroom for the majority of materials that teachers are going to want to bring in. With potential changes in policies, and I know this is where we're talking about processes and regulation, but are we anticipating any kind of challenges if the policy as written is implemented? Are we going to see a lot of problems with that, or will that be easy to execute? Who do you anticipate leading this? And I think you were kind of saying that's still a little bit up in the air on that. And then I would like to know a little bit more about the difference in CASB's IJ recommendation and ours. And then, yeah, just kind of going into, is there an opportunity to report back on challenged materials, like in a MARS report or something else in a work session agenda? Personally, I don't want controversial text read out loud in board meetings where I bring my children. And I think while we all value transparency, it seems a little, I'll leave that at that. Do you understand the kind of what I'm getting at?
There's a couple questions in there, so I'll try to break it down. I think in terms of legal, I'll go with IJ first. I did include CASB's IJ in the packet as well. As you can see, the original IJ is about 3 paragraphs, and spend some time handing over a lot of the work to the district professionals, which would be tied into the regulation. the proposed IJ that Director Jorgensen put forward has definitions in it, has some bulleted points about, it's a little bit more direct and a little bit more, as Superintendent Gall said, the board kind of driving that a little bit more. So that's probably the biggest difference. I have not, and I did not get the brief this afternoon from CASB. I have not looked to see if they changed anything in their IJ this afternoon when they split out their new IJ out. So I have not looked at that yet. Most of the work, I think this might be part of your question, most of the work would, after we have adoption of the new IJ, if that's the will of the board, that would go into the instruction side. And a lot of these would funnel up through the instruction side. I do know that Chief Rasmussen has lots of experience and actually has already started to prepare a working document of what that regulation potentially could look like and what that process could look like. She's had a lot of familiarity in different districts with that. So I don't know if I answered every one of your questions.
Just that you're not anticipating a large challenge in implementing the policy as Jason and the team is bringing forward.
I would not think so.
And then I guess just my other question had to do with, if we're gonna be discussing, and it comes forward every 6 months in front of the board, and there's an opportunity for both sides to kind of state their case on that, would that be you ask kids to leave the room, like, is that, I don't know, Jason, you may know a little bit more about that than I would.
I think that
We can get into the process of it at a later point in time. It's not relevant to the conversation. Not that I'm.
It is relevant.
I'm just saying we can figure that out as we go forth. Is there anything else particularly with the policy itself at this time, Director Huber, from you?
I think it's a good idea to always simplify policies wherever possible, so.
Okay, great.
Great.
Okay.
A couple follow-ups. You're good for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just following back up on who was consulted in creating this version of the policy? And I know you have the CASB draft, which now they have changed, but when it was discussed that the policy committee was eliminated, there was assurance that there would be still inclusion of various voices. And based on the number of LTEs emailing us, did any LTEs get consulted in this policy?
No, but I appreciated their email today, and I forwarded it to Mike, so Mike and I had a quick conversation before tonight of just how do we incorporate some of their voice or concerns into the regulation side. So again, keeping just this policy IJ at that 35,000 foot view, so.
And any teachers have input other than?
Director Hafley and I.
Yes, I'm retired now. So additional
make us any less
teachers who are actively teaching, did anyone have any observations or anyone from, besides again Chief Rasmussen, on the instructional side of this?
Director Hafley and I.
I did.
And then Director X, or Dr. X helped with looking at, I had IJL pretty much edited as it was within some definitions and adding language around libraries and classroom content. And then when we got together with Dr. X is when the three of us said, oh, we could simplify even further, have one place, meet the need of aligning resources and time, effort, management, honestly, to one place. So that's where we're at.
Okay, and I guess the other concern I have that I would share with the folks, many of them who have emailed us.
We're talking like 5 emails, and one of them was like a template one that copy paste. So
Okay.
just to set the reference for those listening,
Right.
it's not like it's been 20 emails, all perfectly their own curation. It's been a couple.
Okay, I've counted at least 12 to 15, and I think I probably have more, because some people have asked me to share things out.
That's perfect.
So, okay, now I'm like, where were we? I'll cover something else then. To your question, Director Bankus, in the CASB, under the reconsideration of library materials and the special policy update, they say
He has it up on his.
Okay, to ensure compliance moving forward, CASB has updated policy IJ and KEC and introduced a new policy. It's in the second paragraph, IJL, to reflect the requirements of the bill. And then, so they've mentioned all of those, and then they further down say, moving forward, CASB recommends that boards of education separate instructional materials and library resources in policy. So then we should have 3. To the point of IJ, KEC, and IJL, I think we should consider KEC as part of this little packet that we're looking at, because that is the public concern side. So I think maybe add that, any edits to that section. Oh gosh darn it, what was the other one?
I can follow up on KEC
Okay.
if you'd like me to.
We are not, no recommendation is coming
No
regarding policy KEC.
No recommendation right now, because KEC involves how a parent would engage with the actual process for challenging material, and that would be part of a regulation and a process that we would establish as a result of IJ. And once we would have that done, then we could bring that forward. It would require significant revision anyway, Director Ott, because if there is a change and there is an adoption, even an IJ or an IJL, we have to remove the probably 20 to 30 in-paragraph references that were made by the policy committee.
Okay.
Yes, so that's part of the reason to me we need to include it in part of the consideration, because it's so deeply related.
We don't have a process yet, so I didn't want to go in there and put in a community, into a community policy just yet. The process has been established as a result of IJ, so.
Putting the cart before the horse, so to speak.
Okay, all right. Then the other 2 things, one, the library programs version, IJ and C, outlined libraries for students and libraries for professional staff as well. I'm not even sure we have that anymore with recent changes. But the library programs for students, one of the concerns expressed by some of the writers is that we will not even be supporting library programs. So I think to reassure people as we do away maybe with IJ and C is to build that into IJL if we do that, or IJ. But to reassure people that we do want to have libraries and engage students in libraries for growth and achievement.
If you need
And
a
just
sentence
the
to
joy.
make that clear, I'm happy to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And just one follow-up, in the beginning you mentioned that you were taking 11 policies and turning them into 1. Were you, when you said policies, were you including the exhibits and the regulations?
Yes. Exhibits,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
I count those policies because you gotta click through them, so they're
All right.
they're all there.
I
It's
just
just
wanted to
3
be sure.
policies.
Well, that's what I was hoping, that it was just the 3. But of course, even with the development of this policy, we will still need certain regulations. All right, thank you.
Okay, any other feedback from the board at this time? And I'm going to summarize certain things in the path forward, the next steps, but any other board member wants to comment on specifics about this policy or
May I?
anything? Yes.
So to your point, Director Ott, if there's things in there where you think that would make people feel more comfortable about, hey, we are consolidating, but we wanna have at least one sentence in there, would you email those to me and I'll put them in? That way they can be the draft for, when it goes to action items, since we're not gonna be able to change between now and the dais on non-action. But if you have those sentences where you're like, looks like a majority is okay with how this reads, but can we add a couple pieces to, include other voice and, the library programs, let's get those on there for you, and then directors can look at them before we pass it.
I would double check to the recommendations from CASB for IJL.
Okay.
Because I think it brings greater clarity. I know there's interest in bringing it all together to address together, but libraries and instruction, there are some significant differences. We don't, if we want to see and continue the transparency of putting out our curriculum every 6 months, it's a lot more work to include every last book that we have librarians trying to buy and put before our students. That is just gonna slow down the system to where it's not even manageable. So I can see the separation still existing.
Well, hopefully our admin team will communicate that process with all of our LTEs so that when they've got these things that they wanna buy for the next school year or whatever program they wanna do, they have something that they can quickly go to Chief Rasmussen and or whoever to go, and he's, cleared, or do they need to become before the board to get them approved? So hopefully it'll be a little bit, streamlined once we get that more built out.
Dr. King.
Can I try to, okay, I'm gonna try to ask what I was thinking about earlier, but now that I've thought about it more, hopefully it will be more coherent. So just to be clear, the semi-annual reconsideration process is something the board may do, but the intention is not that that is the ordinary way. The intention is that, just like with previous policy, superintendent will develop a regulation to provide a process for, as per the law, parents to kind of bring a request for reconsideration, right?
Yeah.
Do we, in the policy, do we need to say that any more clearly? Because there's a sentence at the end,
Yeah.
actually, hold on, give me one second. No, I think we're okay.
At the end of
Maybe we need to just be a little more clear that the superintendent is responsible for developing a regulation that gives the process, and that the board level semi-annual reconsideration is one thing the board is allowed to do via this policy, but it's not like the normal reconsideration process that like the law would care about. Is what I'm saying, does that make any sense at
So under
all?
oversight and authority, maybe adding language in there, Dr. X, to have something where.
So what I would say.
I think it's because in the section where it says reconsideration of instructional materials and library resources, there's a description of a process the board may undertake. But I think what you might be missing is a sentence of the process parents would undertake, which would be something that Superintendent Galt would develop in a regulation.
So
It
to
says at the,
summarize.
sorry, I keep talking over your part, because it says at the bottom, the superintendent or designee will develop regulations to implement this policy. It just wasn't clear to me when reading it that that was one of the things Superintendent Galt was gonna be tasked with.
Okay.
And now I'll shut up.
You're fine.
No, to summarize some of the discussions here, and to figure out what the next steps are in this process. A lot of things were brought up, and I want to also assure the community there is no intent about taking away libraries from our schools or library. That is not the intent. I'm not signing up for that if we are doing away with libraries, as it was mentioned out here. That's not the intent at all. Libraries are a great way to get our students informed. What the board is talking about is the appropriateness of some of the material that is in our libraries or should be in our libraries. So the next steps in the process, one, I know that this is the first draft version of the policy that's coming up, okay? Director Art mentioned some, statements that could be in there about transparency, statements that could reassure our community that was maybe there in previous policies. So if board directors have specific recommendations, going back to even Director Carey talking about a sentence being added in there, if they can send that directly to you and copy Director X in on it, then you can assimilate all that information into that policy, with the general idea being that we do not want to make this policy 10 pages or something like that. The idea being concise, and then ask Superintendent Galt to request Superintendent Galt to come up with a regulation that aligns with that guardrails established in that policy. As far as whether we need IJ and IJL, there is a brief that came from CASB just today that Dr. X hasn't even had an opportunity to look at that. So it's a recommendation coming from CASB. So you may want to look at that recommendation along with what is required by law, and then see what is the middle ground out there. Is there a necessity for two different policies? Can it be combined into one? Or for the in the interest of not having confusion, is it better to have IJ and IJL, two different policies? You can also bring that recommendations to the board. So what we heard, the next steps forward is it is coming as a non-action item in front of the board, but
this policy is going to see a little bit of tweaking between now and the time it comes as an action item in front of the board. But the general idea being that we want to make the process a little bit more streamlined as opposed to what is in IL-R at this time. Okay, not that jumping through all the hoops, but at the same time having clear guidelines to the superintendent. The definition of the definitions that you have listed out there that aligns with the current law. And Director Bank has talked about the Miller test, and your statement that was included in there reflects that state law. And then lastly, after all this is put together, before it comes in front of the board, when it's ready to go, if you can send it to legal and make sure that legal is getting an eyes on it and making sure that it aligns with current law and regulation.
Is the board comfortable with taking the draft IJ as the original version, and then Dr. X and I will work with Director Feedback to give you the red line at action?
Yep.
And then the clean proposed one?
Okay.
You can know what changes we're adding between now and action item?
So by show of thumbs, is the board comfortable with that? Okay.
Restate, sorry, you
Sorry.
want us to?
So like if you've got a few sentences to add in, those would be blue, right? We would add those onto the IJ. If there's something you want to take out, we would have the red line through it. So that this would be like our base policy to work from, so that then when we look at it for action, we can see where directors added sentences or removed a piece, or so that way when we get to an action item, whenever that is, we have the ability to see the changes from tonight's discussion. Does that make sense?
For your proposed IJ, not the
Yes.
CASB proposed.
This
IJ.
proposed IJ would be the starting point, and we would edit it from there.
Okay.
We gotta have a starting point at some
Okay,
place
great.
somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Yeah, this would be the starting point, and then look at CASB's recommendation and see if we need two different policies. Board members will reach out with concise recommendations that they may want to see added into this policy or removed from it. And then you can add those or remove from it and bring that in front of the board. If it is necessary that this has to come to another work session, you can let me know. It may be easier to have this conversation in this setting as opposed to having it from out there. But we can, my intent or the whole, since, and I'll share this with the board as well, the hope and the intent is that since this conversation started with this current seated board and elections were referenced, hopefully this board can end up making the decision as opposed to punting it to the new board, since we've already started the conversation up here. Okay.
Good idea.
Any other feedback at this time? Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate the conversation surrounding this. That's the end of the work session. We have other agenda items at this time. If there is nothing else that, Dr. Gary, you want to say something?
This is my last opportunity to do this, so I just want to be really quick. Because we're not actually meeting again until November 5th, after the election. And I just want to provide a really brief reflection from my own part on the strike action that occurred last week, because this is my last opportunity to do that. So on October 8th last week, right, we had, I don't know if we have the final numbers yet, but we had approximately 1/3 of teachers that participated in the strike. That does mean that the solid majority of our teachers and staff showed up for students, and we were able to keep schools open safely as a place for learning. But nevertheless, I think as a board, we have to kind of, when there is an action like that, listen and try to understand what happened and what the strike was about. And as best I can tell, the strike had two major purposes. The first was to mobilize community support for the election. I have made no secret of my disdain for that motive. We will see what the community makes of that in about 3 weeks. The second was to protest board actions in general, and specifically the decision to allow the master agreement to expire. But I really just need to emphasize to anyone who watches these, that decision was made 10 months ago. It's back in the news and discussion only because CSEA made a decision to time a strike to coincide with the election. The district has already transitioned to the use of an employee handbook, which again is the system every other district in the county uses. You have to drive 60 miles in either direction to find a school district that does not use an employee handbook. Nothing about the strike changes any of that. And there are a number of things that occurred on that day that are dismaying to me. I'm going to let Superintendent Gall and HR and admin handle all of that. I would just fervently wish that in the next 3 weeks, we can keep politics where it belongs, outside of working hours, and refocus on the mission of actually educating kids.
Thank you,
That was,
appreciate.
yeah, thank you.
Great, appreciate your feedback on that. The one thing that I would mention to the community, I know that there is a lot of emotions involved in this, and I have, every time a community member, parent, or even a staff member has been willing to engage in a conversation, there are board members that are interested in having those conversations. I have not declined one opportunity to engage with you, and the opportunity for me is to more listen to what you bring to the table and to have an open line of communication. There is, in this day and age with social media, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I am happy, and so would the rest of my board colleagues, in having those conversations with you, if necessary, to let you, to provide some clarity and also listen to you, and also just share the factual information that is associated with the board decision and the consequences of it. So please, if you want to engage with us, please do. There are several emails the board received, and each one of those emails I've reached out, and I've had 2 people that have taken me up on that offer, and I'm meeting with one, I think 2 days from now. So, but we are happy to meet with you, to engage with you, to listen to you, to get your feedback. Okay, with that, we are at the end of our work session, and we'll take about a 10-minute break and then reconvene on the board dais for our special meeting. Thank you.